This is Troy with vtwins2vh.com, just coming at you with a project. I decided I'd do a video series on this latest project that I'm doing. I got a 70 Chevelle here. Everybody's pretty familiar with this. This is like your classic iconic muscle car. Somebody says muscle car, this is probably what pops into your head. This is an SS454 clone. It started out its life as a Malibu. It does have the 454 in it, but it doesn't have any air conditioning. So that's going to be our project, is going to be put air conditioning, aftermarket air conditioning in this car. And I'm going to use products from a company called Vintageair. If you're involved or familiar with the performance industry and classic cars, you're going to know about the folks at Vintageair. I put Vintageair in another vehicle before. I really liked it. This guy wants air conditioning. All the tech support and everybody over at Vintageair has been great. So I suggested Vintageair. We got the kit ordered in. It took a week or so for us to get it because they were behind. It's the height of summer. It's probably 90 degrees out here right now. So this is my segue into it. So what we got is we got a 70 Chevelle with the big block. It's got no AC, and we've got the entire Vintageair kit here. So when you get your Vintageair kit, it's going to come in some boxes. This is only a couple of them. This is where the condenser is, some of the brackets, and then this box here is your evaporator that goes inside the dashboard that replaces the factory heater box and all. I'm going to open up the hood to the car and I'll show you what it looks like under there now so you can get an idea of what's really going to be happening. So here we go. We got the big block Chevy in here. Everybody should be pretty much familiar with what's going on here. So what we have is we have an alternator, the water pump, the power steering pump. This is the upper radiator hose here. What's going to happen with our kit is we're going to do some things. We're going to take and we're going to locate our compressor over here, and we're going to put our alternator over here. This heater box that you see over here, right there in the back, that's going to be eliminated more than likely with the flat plate. That's going to clean things right up over there. What I'm going to do is we're going to get this car in the garage and we're going to start. I'm going to do it in several segments. I want to do the engine compartment, the air conditioning condenser, and the mounting of the compressor and relocation of the alternator. That'll all be the first phase. So this first video will be of that. And then after we get that all squared away, we'll move to the inside and we'll take the dash apart and we'll do the whole inside. I'll try and break it into small enough segments so that you can watch it. If you're doing a project like this, you'll be able to watch a segment of the video and say, oh, okay, that's what it looks like, or what have you. So stay tuned and watch it happen. All right, folks, so got the car all set up in the garage, and we're going to get ready to start doing this install. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm looking at what I'm going to have to remove off of the car, and always, I mean, this is like Automotive 101, disconnect the battery. Because we are going to be working on the engine. It's always a safe thing to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disconnect the battery. I am going to remove, I'm going to drain the coolant. I'm going to remove the fan and shroud. I'm going to remove the alternator. And I'm going to drain the coolant so I can take the upper radiator hose off. I think I'm going to be able to leave the radiator in. I'm not really sure at this point. I'm going to try and be on the conservative side, not really completely disassemble anything that I don't have to, just for time. And you know, old cars, when you take stuff apart and put it back together, sometimes you run into some problems. Hardware's frozen, brakes, or what have you. So I'm going to bring the camera over here and I'll show you the components I'm going to be working with. Okay, so here's my battery. I'm going to disconnect that. My alternator's here. I'm gonna take and drain my coolant. I'm gonna get my heater hoses out of the way, my upper radiator hose out of the way. I'm gonna get my alternator, my fan shroud out of the way. My alternator is gonna relocate to over here, and then my compressor is going to mount over there. So that's really what I'm going to work on in this segment, is kind of getting things apart so that I can start, you know, getting all this stuff out of the way so I can start putting on my alternator and my AC compressor and figuring out how everything's got to be routed and wired as far as belts, hoses, wires, and things of that nature. So I'm going to go off camera, I'm going to disassemble this stuff, and then I'll come back. Okay, so here we are. I took my my two heater hoses that were down here, and I removed the upper and lower heater hoses. I just tucked them back here out of the way. I took my alternator out of the factory location that was over here, and I took my wire and harness, and I pulled it back. I took my wire and harness off, and you know, I'm kind of anal like this. I like to tag everything. It just makes it so much easier. I know right now I look at it and I go, wow, that's pretty obvious where it goes. But you know, it could be a few days before I get back to messing around with this. It could be a week, depending upon if I have to wait for a part or something to come in. So I tag this, and then that way there, when I'm ready to go back to this, I've got it all set, and it's really easy for me to figure out. So here is my alternator setup. So what I've done is I've taken my top bolt out of the water pump, and I put this bracket in here, and I assembled this bracket that the folks at Vintageair gave me. So you see how it looks here like this. This alternator, now this whole thing is just mocked up. So I mean, my bolts aren't tight or anything. This is how my alternator is going to work. It looks like we're looking pretty good to be able to line up to my power steering pulley down there. So everything looks pretty good. So at this point, I'm just going to leave this like I have it here, and I'm going to get my kit, and I'm going to get the parts out to mount the air compressor over here, and then I'm going to mock that up. These brackets aren't painted or anything, so until I get everything mocked up, I'm not going to paint anything or do any of that. I'm going to get it all mocked up. I'm going to get my belts and my hoses and stuff to where I want them to be. Then I can paint my brackets, and then I can put everything together permanent. Alright folks, so I'm back now. I got my alternator and bracket mocked up. I got my AC compressor and bracket mocked up. I'm going to need to get some belts that are going to be the proper length. I'm also going to need to get some spacers to space my brackets against the head and alternator and the AC compressor. This is stuff that wasn't supplied to me in the kit, and if you haven't done this type of stuff before, situation is that the kit gives you a lot of the stuff, but there's so many different variables with engine combinations and vehicles and bracketry and everything that it's next to impossible to have everything you need. If you take it out of the package and you bolt it up and everything's fine, you don't need any extra hardware, good luck. God bless you, man. I've never actually bolted anything out of my life. I've always had to finagle something. It just always seems to work out that way. So I'm in this part of the process. I'm going to grab the camera, I'm going to bring you over, and I'm going to show you where the stuff is. Okay, so here we are. I got my bracketry bolted on here, and it's holding my AC compressor here like this. So now this will swing back and forth like this to tighten my belt. Now if you look, I'm going to line you up with the pulley down here. There's your pulley right there, and if you come back like this, and you know, it's really weird because of the way that my camera is here, but I am in line right there with my front pulley. Hopefully you can see that. But the other thing you'll notice is I've got this little space right here where my bracket is, and a space here where my bracket is. I'm going to get a couple of spacers, or make a couple of spacers to go in there, so that this is going to be socked down nice and tight, and I don't have to worry about it wanking around. So that's my air AC compressor side. Now over here I've got my alternator. You can see how we're bolted to the water pump here, just like we are over here with this other one. And then also my backer bracket here bolts on the head with 2 bolts, just like this one here does. And then I got a spacer, and then I got this swing bracket that allows me to adjust my alternator. One of the other things I got going on, I don't know if you can really see down in here too well, but I've got a power steering pump here, obviously my water pump, and then my pulley way down the bottom. So I don't know if you're going to be able to see all of these things lining up, but I am really going to try to get you there. So here's my alternator. There's my power steering, and way down there you can see my pulley for my crankshaft. So in a perfect world, what's going to happen is my belt's going to come off of here, it's going to go over across this, it's going to catch my crankshaft pulley, it's going to come wrap around this power steering pump, and then back to my alternator, and everything's going to be good. Same thing over here. I'm going to use the outer pulley here for my AC compressor, and I'm going to go from here down to the outer pulley on the crankshaft, and then to the outer pulley. So what I have now is I have a little list of parts. I've taken and I've measured out approximately where my belts are going to be. Usually belts are kind of tough because of the geometry of things. When your alternator starts pivoting, it does different things. So don't be alarmed if you measure your belt out. I use a cord usually to do that because it's hard with the tape measure, obviously, because it's stiff. So I use a piece of like thin diameter extension cord, drop light cord, and do it that way, and that will get you pretty close. So I get myself in the center of the adjustment, and then on my swing for my alternator or my compressor, I get in the center of my adjustment, I measure it there. That way there I can go a little bit smaller or a little bit bigger, regardless of the size of the belt. And ironically, both belts on this car come up to be about 58 inches. So I'm going to get a couple of belts, I'm going to come back, like I said, I got to get a couple of spacers and some washers and some bolts and stuff to make it right. Then when I come back from the parts store, I'm going to mock this whole thing up, and in theory, I should be pretty much good to go with my bracketry. And then we'll make sure that that's all right. Then we can work on some wiring for the alternator, and you know, move on with the project from there. Okay, so back here, I've got my whole belt situation all squared away. Everything's mocked up. Takes several trips back and forth to the parts store to get the belt the right way so that you still have some adjustment, and you're kind of centered in your adjustment, and your belts are where they want to go, and everything's right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the camera, I'm going to come over, and I'll show you where I'm at. Okay, so here we go. Here's my my compressor and my compressor belt right there. I got all my brackets. None of this stuff is really like exactly tightened up. It's more of a like a mock-up situation, because I'm going to take and probably paint all these brackets. But you can see I got some spacers that I put in here, and to get everything to line up. But if you look at our belt situation here now, here's your water pump, and it just has a nice line coming right up to the compressor. Over here on this side, I've got the alternator. I got plenty of adjustment down here, as you can see. I'm lined up really good. Everything looks great. I'm in line with my my water pump drive pulley. Everything looks very, what I would call, right and straight and in line, and basically everybody's happy here. Okay, so here we go. We got you know, this is the first segment of it. We got the thing disassembled, we got our parts out, we got our alternator relocated to the other side of the car, we got our AC compressor mounted, we got our brackets sorted out, we've purchased whatever hardware we needed, made up whatever spaces we needed to make, and made several trips back and forth to the auto parts store, but everything's looking really good now. So tomorrow, it's like 5 o'clock, it's done time for me. It's filler time, so to speak. So the next segment, what we'll do is I'll just kind of make sure that everything's right. I'll get everything all dialed in, tighten it up, make sure everything's true, and then after that, it'll be disassemble that, and I'll paint all the brackets. Next segment will be taking the front of the car apart, putting the AC condenser and the receiver dryer and things of that nature, getting some of our other plumbing done. So stay tuned for the next segment. Thanks.